with how the newspapers had been covering the German market attack. Obviously, a lot of the papers went to print before a lot of the details came out. But let's turn to some of the other stories that the papers are covering in the morning. And Alicia, you're going to kick off with the Financial Times main story. And this is Donald Trump, according to the paper, saying that he would like NATO countries to spend 5% of GDP on defence.
Yeah, and I know that on the face of it, 5% doesn't seem like a lot, but the current NATO target is 2%, and only 23 of the 32 NATO members even reached the 2% target at the moment. And just to put it into even broader context, Labour, our government's goal is to increase it just to 2.5%, but only if the economic backdrop allows. So that's not really even a secure pledge from us in the UK, who spend significantly more than lots of other NATO members. So a very big ask from Donald Trump here. We know that he's a little bit wavering with his support to NATO. He keeps saying that maybe America will pull out and that they are doing just a bit too much in terms of the aid they're giving to Ukraine. In this article, though, it does reassure that he will still be helping Ukraine. But it does seem slightly threatening. It seems like Trump is saying, well, you will need to pull this up. They can't all be waiting on us. And if you don't, then there's going to be some kind of consequences.
And this is something that he has been saying for some time, hasn't he? Yeah. About the fact that other countries just aren't committing enough and they can't just rely on the US to sweep in if there's a problem.
But the sad reality is that we do sort of need the US to be there, to be supporting, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in NATO, whatever it is. These organisations do need the US. And Trump's been saying since, I'm going to end the wars on day one when I get into office. So from January 20th, he'll be trying to end these wars. But I also think that this speaks to the wider sort of tensions that are going on in the wider world, but also in Europe. We've got Russia and Ukraine. We've got all the issues that are going on in the Middle East. And I think that people are feeling unsettled right now, feeling uncertain about the future, whether the US is going to go and become a more isolationist place. And this is saying we'll be there, but only if you're all there with your weapons and guns blazing, a little bit like the US might want to be.
Yeah, and maybe the picture will become clearer when Donald Trump does take over in January. Take us to the article in the Mail. Lettice, you were going to kick off with this.
Yes.
The headline here is Fury as Sarah Judge says the press can't be trusted to be fair.
Yeah. So this story is following on from the tragic case that we've been seeing all over the media recently about Sarah Sharif. She was a young child who was murdered by her father, stepmother and uncle. They've all recently been sentenced to a huge long sentence. The father got 40 years. But the judge has now made a ruling saying that all the professionals who were present in the case and gave evidence, so that's the social workers or the judge who presided over her family court case, when she was allowed to stay with her parents, will be able to remain anonymous. And the reason he said they should be able to remain anonymous is because the media can't report fairly on the accuracy of the case, which I think is quite a bold position to take. I think it's an unfair sort of generalisation. Obviously, I'd probably be quite biased in this, and I'm sure we all would. But a lot of media organisations, including the Daily Mail, have come out and are challenging this ruling because they're saying that these people do need to be held to account. And if they're not held to account, then future judges or future social workers will, when in the same position, might not take an extra measure of care. Sarah was ultimately let down by these organisations that should have protected her. So there does need to be some sort of holding to account.
Do you think that's right? Do you think transparency is key here? And as Lettice was pointing out, the perpetrators of the crime are behind bars. They're the one who are responsible for her death. But there are questions around whether or not some of the concerns could have been flagged and something done about it earlier.
Yeah, I think the way I see it is that if there is a miscarriage of justice in another sector, maybe not so closely tied to the legal sector, your name is on the front page of every single newspaper. If it were a politician, if it were a boss of a big company, we've seen this countless times, your name will be everywhere and people will know that it's you and you will kind of get your comeuppance for it, I suppose. And weirdly, the thing that's coming to mind, and obviously very different case, but I'm thinking about Paula Venables with the post office scandal. Where it's seen as a miscarriage of justice and where someone at the top made a wrong call or a wrong decision.
Which she still says that she didn't and wasn't given the right information.
Exactly, when they were accused of doing that, we all were able to identify who she was. And I think that that's where people are seeing a little mismatch here. They're saying, how come in this particular case, these people are getting away with kind of staying under the parapet and not really having any attention because of it, which I understand.
OK, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out then. Let's move on to an article inside The Guardian, and this is a subject that we touched on a little bit earlier, and the response to the formal announcement yesterday that Keir Starmer is appointing Lord Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to Washington.
Yes,
What's the reaction been?
A mixed reaction, I think, especially amongst Labour MPs, because for lots of them, Mandelson is this big Labour grandee. He's someone that lots of them probably aspire to follow in the footsteps of. But Keir Starmer comes under so much criticism for really just trying to be Blair 2.0. And I think this has not done much to kind of get rid of that feeling amongst lots of the Labour MPs who feel like Keir Starmer is following in the shadow of someone past rather than making his own path, if that makes sense. And also, let's not forget that Peter Mandelson is not a baggage-free hire. He's not someone who's particularly been shy of some pretty bad headlines over the years, including to do with his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein as well. So that's definitely caused a level of controversy. I think what was really interesting in this article as well is that they were saying that he was asked quite a few times whether this role was of interest to him, whether he would want to be appointed to this role. And apparently Mandelson said he had absolutely no desire and that he doesn't want to be a hotel manager so late in his career. And I think he's just saying that he's kind of slightly above this job, and now that seems to have gone full circle and he's doing it anyway.
Well, yes, and his supporters say that he's really well suited to the job. They say that he's got great experience of at the high levels of politics and is diplomatic, knows all about trade. But they've also had some slightly unwelcome reaction from one of Trump's aides, haven't they?
Exactly. And the reality is this is such an important position that is going to be even more important in a way with Trump coming in, who can be a rather controversial figure himself. This role is so important to be able to have. And Trump and Mandelson have very differing views, whether that be on China, where Mandelson, even earlier this year, has been saying, you know, we need to reevaluate our relationship with China. We need to sort of become closer with them, refresh it almost. Whereas Trump, we know, is very sort of anti-China and anti that state on the whole. So it's going to be interesting to see how they can make this relationship work between the two of them. There's a lot of criticism we've seen so far, even on the front page of The Telegraph. You know, one of his closest aides was calling him a moron. So it's going to see how this pans out, let's say. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, another one to watch. OK, let's take a quick look at the front of The Express. They lead with the story, King positive about return to full duties. And this is something that we were reporting on at Sky News yesterday, the fact that the general message was a positive one coming from the palace about the King's health.
I'm sure, but I do often feel when I see these kinds of stories, I think realistically, are they ever going to come forward and say, do you know what, I actually don't feel ready to commit to royal duties? Or do they feel such a kind of obligation to people in the UK that they kind of feel like they have to put that brave face on and really throw themselves back into it?
You get a sense, certainly our royal correspondent was saying he loves to be busy and he's really keen to get out there and he'd carry out a full calendar as much as possible.
Yeah, so busy almost though that you forget that he's had quite the year with his cancer and undergoing treatment, and he's 76 years old. You know, he's not sort of a spring chicken anymore by any terms. So for anyone at that age to be doing so many, you know, what are they called? Meetings and things. Engagements, that's the word, sorry. So many engagements, travelling the world and undergoing some very serious chemotherapy for a very, very serious illness. You do wonder how he keeps going.
Absolutely. We're out of time, though. Good to see you both, as ever. Thanks very much indeed for taking us through the papers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got your Sunday mornings